County as a discrete item for consideration, and we actually had pages and pages of introduction and background, and then sort of decided, you know what, let's just cut away most of that. There's enough there to show that it was consciously thought of in 2001 when we became a legal entity of our own. It was looked at again in 08 and 09. It was looked again in 13 and 14, and here we are in 18. And at various points in time, various things have been considered. We've gone on tours of other municipalities to sort of see how they approach the issue. We've assessed ourselves and our abilities and our locations and our geography. We've looked at our own use of technology. We have surveyed the public and consulted with them to find out, you know, where their trigger points are or where there's room for improvement. And we've done a lot of consideration. And what that takes you to at this point in time, in 2018, is that there are a number of ways that this municipality could proceed with respect to this general topic and proposition. I should start out by saying, you know, I've got a little over 14 months on the job here, and when I was asked to, when I first started, I was effectively given carte blanche to take a look around and take an assessment and a temperature of the organization and its strengths and weaknesses and where it was and where it could be going. And I should say unequivocally that I don't think problems with customer service are a top 3 item with Norfolk County. Broadly speaking, and overall, county staff do a pretty good job of providing service to the public. On occasion, various things take longer than we'd like to. That comes back to resourcing, and frankly, that always comes back to a conversation about how much tax you want to pay in return for what level of service, and that's an ongoing sort of philosophical discussion for the community. But within the context of being at, you recall back to the budget, we're the far left of the graph, right? The lowest of reasonable comparators. Within the context of that level of resourcing, the service level is really quite good. Broadly speaking, the thing I'm quite happy with and proud of is that generally speaking, people start from the right intellectual position, which is wanting to help, wanting to try to make things happen. And there are always a number of reasons why you know, we can't necessarily hit perfection, but what I haven't seen by and large is sort of obstructionist, no, I just don't want to. That sort of, we don't start from that place. So with those sort of general remarks about it, generally a good attitude and generally a desire to help move the community forward, you have here a report that's obviously meant to be sort of high level and generalist in nature, but it's time to start getting a little more specific if it is the will of this council to move forward on what I'd like to refer to as the customer service file. And you have a couple of themes or general concepts here. Technology could be a great solution to some of our challenges. And when I say technology, you're almost guaranteed to be looking at a customer relationship management type of software. You can call that 3.1, it has different titles, but the bottom line is a way for the community to call in or email in or somehow communicate, and for tickets to be generated and work orders to be made and those to be dispersed to the type of people who provide that service. I mean, that's really what it is. There are bells and whistles up to, if you go to Kitchener, you go to London, you go to Toronto, you go to large places, they have telephone numbers you can call and they have staff on working 24/7, just like 911 operators. We are not that large. You know, that's the Cadillac version. It is possible, and there are municipalities in this province that provide, I'll answer the phone, you get a real life human being, they will generate a work that exists. That's sort of the Cadillac, or the Lexus, whatever it is you prefer to drive. But that's the really great model, and they go all the way down to very simplistic systems that are a few $1,000s a piece and obviously far less robust and functional. It's impossible, though, to be thinking about technology as a solution without acknowledging the fact and the reasons why we've joined SWIFT and otherwise are making some corporate efforts to bring internet and fiber to our rural areas, because you just can't describe that as a one-size-fit-all solution. With respect, there's just a very large part of our population that won't ever have access to sort of a technological fix. So that cannot be the be-all and end-all. At any rate, I don't specifically want to walk you through the entire report. We can talk about facilities, we can talk about expanding service, we can talk about consolidating service, you can talk about how we might want to manage that organizationally through a specific department or keep it spread and dispersed. There are different models that work with different sizes of communities and different types of organizations. So we have some good choice here. And really, ultimately, the notion of this report is to try to get some specific feedback. It could well be that you'd just like to stay the course, that we have other issues you want to focus on ahead of customer service, and that would be fair. It could well be that there are 2 or 3 of these that you find really appealing and you'd like a further report back on and to build up a stronger business case, and we'd be happy to do that. Really, we're very happy to take your instruction. We do have a number of, we've identified 7 things we think could work. And with those as general introductory remarks, we'd be really happy to take, not just myself, the whole senior team would be happy to take some questions.
Okay. We'll start with Councillor Oliver.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the CAO for the report. I did have the privilege of sitting on this customer service committee for the last few years when Candy Webb was still here and when it was operational, and we did go around and do the tour that David has referred to. Mayor Luke was also part of it, as I recall. I just want to make a couple of comments, I guess, and also ask a couple of questions, and I will ask them first. First of all, with respect to providing enhanced online services and to the CAO, that wasn't in here necessarily as any one of the options to pursue further. And I'm thinking of things as simple as people being able to pay their bills online, to perhaps book an hour's time at the arena online and pay for it, or book a community hall for an evening, that kind of thing. I think I'm correct when I'm told that we still don't have that capability for people to make those bookings online and to make payments for things with a credit card or online. That's my first question. Am I correct, or am I behind the times on that?
Let me give the first stab at an answer, and then maybe GMs who know better than I in specific areas can pipe up. From my position, I would say we are not uniform, and we are working towards progress on a number of those fronts. I can tell you that we actively have staff in finance looking at how we can start taking donations online, for instance, as a result of policies you've passed within the last month. Obviously, it's the potential of a Norplex or similar that's prompting that, but we're looking at making payments to this corporation easier online, and that technology can be, should be, and we're openly talking about applying to other areas by way of example. I can't tell you exactly where we are or how far you can get on recreational programming. I do know that this council received a report this calendar year talking about being able to pay one's property taxes through a third-party vendor that would effectively take credit cards. So we are moving overall on the technology side of making it easier for individuals or residents and users to pay us monies for services rendered. I sort of find it hard to give that's a universalist answer. In individual business areas, there may be different answers. I'm looking under my GM team. I don't know if there's anything anyone specifically wants to say. We are uneven. We are moving forward in a very positive manner, and that is actually actively being looked at by staff, at least in a number of areas. Those are good statements.
Okay, thank
On
you.
this subject, Yakov, did you have something?
I was just going to elaborate a little bit further on that, sort of being the area that the AT department belongs to. We are constantly engaged with our various business stakeholders and the other divisions in looking for opportunities to evolve the way we deliver service to the community, and certainly looking at electronic ways of delivering that and online accessibility in that regard. And I think even to give the recreational aspect, to talk about some of those areas, we've been sort of looking at software and looking at how booking can be done through those measures as well. So that's certainly something that's live in our discussions all the time.
It just seems to me, Mr. Chairman, if I can continue, that's an area in terms of booking recreational facilities and paying for same, that as a councillor over my career, I've had comments from the public about that has been an area of some frustration sometimes for the people in terms of getting through to the right real person to answer their call and to then make a booking and to perhaps be told they have to come in to pay, et cetera, et cetera. I think that would go a long way to improving customer service in that area. And what it will also then do is free up staff time from having to be on the phone or at the counter doing those kind of administrative things if it can be done online. So that's one suggestion, Mr. Chair. One other one that I found quite intriguing, that would be one of the ones I would ask Mr. Cribbs to look into further, as that's really what he's asking us to do in the recommendation, is the idea of expanding a library partnership. I mean, when I read those paragraphs, suddenly it was almost an aha moment in that we've got the libraries in 5 urban communities. They're being staffed Monday to Friday, typically during business hours. And that might be a very, very effective, cost-effective, as well as successful method of improving customer service, making people more easily able to get the service they want in their own home community. So that would be one that I think is well worth looking at further. And I think my final one at this point, I had number 5. Oh yes, the Langton Administration Building one in particular, and this would be directed at Ms. Miranda. If Health and Social Services see the potential benefit of having one of their frontline delivery people that deals with clients possibly located in the available office space in the Langton building during certain designated days of the month, for example, I think that one is well worth pursuing further as well. So those are my comments.
Thank you for that. And further questions or comments with respect to the options? Councillor Black?
I'm not sure. I think the remarks of our CAO about whatever we do, it's going to cost us money. And is this a major priority? Well, I think it's always a priority, but to what extent? And the feedback that I usually get is people don't like speaking to a machine. I'd rather have the live person, and I know we can push 0 and speak to an operator, but then when you go to staff, just I think during my time on council, I think it was more frequent that I could actually get a real live person on the phone compared to now, but maybe that's just the day and age that we live in. But that's one of the complaints that I get from people. And then secondly, it's bylaw, lack of bylaw or not being able to get a hold of bylaw, or bylaw doesn't get back to me, or if they do initiate something that there's no follow-up on it. So those are some of the bigger complaints that I get. I don't know how it fits into any one of these options, but those are the ones I get.
Okay. Thank you. Further? Yes, Councillor Geis.
Thank you. I was on page 7 when I read that Langton and Delhi closed or expand. Like I said earlier, was Langton and Delhi close or expand service? Well, I like the expanding of the services. I'd like to go on page 9 too, when it talks about the Langton Administration Building and the Delhi Building, and theoretically, looking at Langton, certainly Langton probably services most of the southwestern part of Norfolk County. And if you look at things, how they are out, we have, as far as places that they can go, it's Simcoe, Delhi, and Langton. And if you look at that, that's basically something that I'd like to see. And people are looking for that they don't have to run from Langton or the westerly part of Norfolk County. So theoretically, I think it's important to have Langton open, and I also like the idea of social services, as Mr. Oliver has said, that to have that department there for 1 or 2 or days or whatever, whether it's a month or a week or whatever, those are things that are going to work, and I'm hoping that we get that. That is, to me, is customer service. Theoretically, if Langton and Delhi were to shut down, that's a heck of a way to drive all the way to Simcoe to get a permit for either a building or anything else that you might need. And somebody talked about doing it on the phone or whatever, or I don't think you can get a permit that way by calling somebody that you need to, that you can get a permit, because I'm sure that there are things that have to be looked at, and making sure that it's correct. So theoretically, I'm hoping that when this comes forward, that we continue with what we have and maybe bring it forward. We talk about people wanting services and everything like that, and people complain that we have to wait and we don't get to, and I know that now that Langton has an extra person in there, and that's helped. Perhaps there needs to be a little bit more there as well, as far as I'm concerned. So I thank you very much for that, and hope to see something happen that is actually for good for the western end of Norfolk. There, I got it.
Okay. I noticed that the recommendation calls for which options we want more information on. Okay, so anybody else wish to comment? To Mayor Luke and then Brun.
Well, thank you, and certainly as Councillor Oliver alluded to earlier, we went on a tour, we visited the city of Waterloo and looked at their system. Quite sophisticated. I think it was city of Woodstock was the other one. And finally Tilsonburg, which I think many on the tour thought that what they were doing in Tilsonburg was something what a smaller, not so much a larger city, was a good system. So that was very impressive. They're set up in Tilsonburg to deal with concerns and complaints. Just a couple things, if I may. I get a lot of phone calls on my job from people with complaints and concerns. A lot more, probably 80% of my job is dealing with concerns, and a lot of people that I tell them some of the concerns I get are quite surprised that people would call a mayor with those concerns. A cat up in the tree in Port Dover, a dog barking in a condominium in Simcoe, those types of things. Well, what's the mayor going to do? Well, the mayor is going to do whatever he or she has to do, take that concern, pass it on to staff so that it can be dealt with, followed up on. I agree with the comments of the CAO at the onset that I think we're getting a lot better at customer service. And I think that for the most part, I'd have to say that staff is very good at following up, and there are, unfortunately, those that don't believe returning a phone call or following up on something is part of their job description, and that's sometimes which takes a lot of times when things aren't acted on. Yesterday, I was in downtown Simcoe, parked at Robinson Street, and I got out of the car because I was waiting for my wife for a moment, and number 40, 41, and 42 have garbage in the walkway, and the store is obviously closed, but quite a bit of garbage, not in a bag, just garbage piled, and a large broken window, broken glass all over. So I pulled out this and I sent it off to bylaw. I may get a response from bylaw, to be perfectly honest with you, and I may not. I would think that bylaw, back at work today, should be, according to our policy, be back with a response to me on a phone call in a day or two. Because that's what our policy is. And if I don't get a follow-up by tomorrow evening from bylaw, then my time, again, will be following up with them. That's where I'm having my biggest problem. I'm not here to make staff busy. I don't make up complaints or concerns to forward them. But I think we have an obligation, Mr. Chair, in serving our public, to act on these things that we think are important, or what people think are important. So I don't really have the solution. I certainly like the idea along the lines of what number one is, a call center customer management software system similar to Tilsonburg's, where somebody calls me, I say, just a minute, on hold, right to the customer service rep. And when that happens in Tilsonburg, they assign a work order number to it, goes into the system, it's logged, the time, the complaint, and forwarded to staff. If it's not responded or acted on in 48 working hours, the red flag goes on, and that customer service rep follows up with the appropriate staff to get back to the customer. It's a system, rather than, oh, gee, I forgot to do that, or I... So, Mr. Chair, I don't really have I think we are getting better at this. I certainly don't agree with 24-hour staffing for a municipality of this size. As Councillor Oliver said, maybe a partnership with the library or some other facility is, why not? But I know I spend, and I'm not complaining, but I spend a lot of time not just initiating, but following up with the initial concern that people have. Mr. Chair, I don't have anybody else around this table. I want to use this for example. It'll be almost 3 months ago, we got a ruling from the OMB on uses on Hastings Drive. I only had 4 complaints this weekend about trailers and other things on Hastings. How many complaints do you think or concerns I've had about enforcement on Hastings Drive since April the 16th? It's probably close to 50. I'm going to bring that up later under other business.
Yeah.
And still not solved, Mr. Chair. Still not solved. Still not knowing how we're going to deal with those 9 trailers sitting on Hastings that should have been removed April the 17th. Or thereabouts. I mean, you got to give people time and notice. We got another week. When next week's meeting is up, then we're back in another month. Are we going to still have trailers? Well, I'm off on a tangent. I got to get back
Right,
on
you
here.
are.
So,
gonna
Mr. I am, and I'm wrong, and I apologize. But, Mr. Chair, I don't have the perfect solution here, but I do really appreciate the work that has gone into this report, something to think about. If we don't act on it, maybe something that a new council even will have a closer look at. I hope. Always looking to improve things. Always, always, always. Never stop looking to deliver the goods on time. Thank you.
Okay, before we move, I saw Councillor Brunton's hand up, and then hopefully we can get a recommendation on the floor. Brunton.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just on the customer service, I kind of look at it, it's every employee's job to provide customer service. I mean, it doesn't matter what department you're in, or even if you're out working on the side of the road, to me, and it bothers me, when I come into town, I see something on the road that needs to be picked up, yet the trucks will drive right by it. They'll drive right by it and leave it there. Could be a branch, and I can bring you one the other day that's in front of Holy Trinity High School. There's a big branch sitting on the side of the road, got knocked off. You saw that one? I don't know how many people have driven by that before. I don't know if it's still there.
Oh, didn't you stop it?
Okay, we're looking at how to fix this situation.
Well, what I'm saying is, I have the same problem when people call, and I don't know the answers to everything. So I say, here's the phone number. Phone it after hours. There's a water and sewer thing, and if they don't call, if you don't get a response, let me know, and I'll look into it a little deeper. That's how I handle it. But I agree with Councillor Geisens on a comment he made about the Langton office and maybe expanding out there. I kind of look at, our county manager indicated about the communications committee. Maybe there's some merit in looking at both these things somehow being located, some or partial. I don't agree that all four have to be in one location. I just don't see where, pardon me, but where we need four people, but I guess that's been passed. But maybe there's some merit in looking at the communications and the customer service somehow. To me, they're related, being together and possibly partially in Langton. But I know that takes some further investigation, and maybe it could be looked at down the line, I guess. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Oliver.
Mr. Chair, I'm willing to put a motion out, basically what's in the report, and it would be to initiate, and I think it's just discussions and further work,
Right.
but it would be options 3, which is staff training. I mean, we've talked around that. I think you can really never do too much training. There should be probably annual refreshers relative to customer service within essentially every department that has to provide it. So option 3, I think, would be worthy of further study. Option 5, sorry, I better get my page correct here. Yes, again, this possibility of providing services from other departments, particularly health and social services, at the Langton Administration Building on an appropriate level, and also option 6. So those would be my 3 from Mr. Cribb's report, Mr. Chair. But the other thing I would like to have as part of my motion is that particularly within Community Services Department, it be made a priority to investigate either on the phone or online registrations and payments for various recreational programs and facilities.
Okay, so your motion is options 3, 5, and 6 plus
Plus further
Online-
investigating online
booking
service
of
delivery for registrations and
programs and
payments.
services.
I don't think I mean, well, maybe I do, Peter. Is that what option 4 is? Well, yeah, that sort of indirectly is option 4, but it's talking about closing or adding services or reducing. I'm specifically interested in, I hope not expensive, but having staff investigate how and cost of doing more online and on phone, which eliminates the need to speak with a person face-to-face or at the counter.
Enhancing service.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? That's your motion, Councillor Oliver.
Yep.
I need a seconder.
If there's anybody willing to second it.
Wells seconds that. Okay, it's on the floor here. Any further discussion on Councillor Oliver's suggestion here? If there isn't, I will call the motion to recommendation. Those in favor? Those are all in favor. Thank you. And we'll probably be hearing a lot more about that one in a month or two. Okay, moving on to page 115. This is capital status report. Is this yours, James?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kathy LaPlante will be presenting this report.
I did have a little bit difficult reading the small print in the chart, so I've asked that they be put up on the board here. Go ahead.
Thank you. To the Chair and members of Council, the report before you this afternoon is a capital status report as of May 31st, 2018. This year is the first year we're providing Council with an interim status report on the capital projects, an attempt to provide better reporting to Council and members of the public. The report actually outlines the status of capital projects that are active at this point in time. It does not include the drainage, municipal drainage construction projects. We are planning on bringing a subsequent report to Council in the future outlining the status of those particular projects. If you refer to page 2 of the report, there's a table summarized of the actual listing that's been attached. And as Councillor Columbus mentioned, I understand that the report is a little difficult to read. It was photocopied in a different way than it's on the internet. So hopefully you'll be able to read what's on your screen. What's interesting is we do have 310 projects that are active, and of those 310 projects, we have 262 that are still open. But it is interesting, if you read a lot of the comments, a lot of the projects are planned to be completed by the end of 2018. So we hope that the total active projects will definitely be reduced. The projects that are canceled is notable also. You'll notice that we're recommending to cancel 10 projects worth $22.5 million. And these projects are mainly, there's the biosolids treatment storage facility. It's was budgeted at $8.5 million, and Port Dover wastewater pollution control plant for $9.3, and the Simcoe water pollution control plant building upgrades for $4.5. Staff is recommending canceling these projects. The scope of the projects are being revised, so they'll be brought forward within the 2019 capital plan for Council's consideration at that time. At the end of 2017, we had 214 active capital projects. Again, I'd just like to say, hopefully that will be much lower at the end of 2018 compared to 2017, because we've always talked about reducing the number of projects and being able to deal with the projects that are outstanding. Financial services, I just wanted to mention too, financial services have, for this report, worked closely with the project managers and the general managers to review the status of the projects. It outlines the dollar values spent to date, and within the report, the recommendations are contained whether to close or cancel the projects. We had very few projects that were over budget. It was just over budget by $115,000 that we're recommending to close. But on the positive side, we're recommending closing projects that we've had a savings of $425,000. So if you have any questions, I'd be pleased to answer your questions, and members of the senior leadership team will also be able to answer any of your questions if you need. Thank you.
Questions? Yes, Doug, or Mr. Councilor.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Kathy. Kathy, it says 42% of the projects that are water and wastewater related. Was that identified when we did the study there, what, a year or two ago with the consultant, where we projected and, you know, revised our future, you know, the report? I can't name the consultant, but we dealt with the holding tank issue and all that. What was the name of that consultant we dealt with?
Through the chair to council, DFA, I believe is the consultant.
Okay. Was that 42% of these capital projects identified at the time in that particular document?
Through the chair to council, may not be the exact amount, because at that time I believe the study was completed in 2014 or 2015. So the projects that would have been included at that time would have been from that capital plan. But we do, on an annual basis, update the information when we calculate the rates. We take that into consideration.
Well, when I look at it, I guess my comment would be it's scary to think, and I realize some of these things have to be done, but I kind of feel sorry for the people on water and sewer rates, where we're going with that, you know, long term. To me, it's going to be a surprise for a lot of people, I think. My last question, I guess, in relation to, I know we set these projects out over a course of budgets over the last few years and that, but, and some were here before my time, but can you tell me of that, say on the first, page 116, projects remaining active, approved budget of 122 million, say, what we anticipated to be borrowed money, debentured money? Any idea out of that 122 million? Just a ballpark figure? Any idea? I can see the wheels spinning over there.
Through the chair to council. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can get you that number.
Yeah.
I know the number over the next, for the next 10 years. I think we could easily get that number, but I'm not sure we have really an accurate number for you right now.
Well, it doesn't have to be accurate, because I'm sure it'll be scary. Listen, on that, well, I'll leave it at that for now, thanks.
Okay. Further? Mayor Luke?
The one question I had is, I am on page 135. It's in the small print. I can read it. The question, I guess probably through to Lee Robinson, is the Delhi wastewater treatment plant upgrade. I think we're all familiar there of what happened. It's a project that the engineering was started a long time ago. When will we be completely finished? Now, I don't notice it says July, and I assume that's July of 2018, but can you give us any indication on that? It's been quite a haul there with that plant, just roughly.
Through the chairman to council, certainly we're expecting substantial performance of the contract to occur this month. And that's the most recent contract, and that is the last of the contracts for that facility. So we are expecting that by the end of 2018, excuse me, the project will be completely wrapped up. There'll be the odd warranty items that have to be addressed in 2019, but generally speaking, it will be done. We will do a grand opening for council and anybody else who's interested in attending the facility at that time.
Very good, so it should just be wrapping up when Waterford maybe gets started later this summer. Is that fair?
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, anything further? Councilor Brunton?
Or again, through you to Kathy. Kathy, I asked you this question some time ago, but 2017, we issued 19 point something million in debentures, and that brought us up to about 65 million in debt payments, I guess. What, and I know I asked a week or so ago that where we're going to issue more debentures this year. You say there wasn't that much coming due this year, maybe next year it'll be, but does the 4 or 5 million we talked or spoke about with Lee in the up on Highway 3 with the contamination, is that included in there, or is that that's yet to come? I believe you told me, right?
Through the chair to Councillor Brunton, we may get into this with the next report with the Standard & Poor's rating. It's because it's somewhat related. We're projecting over the next 3 years to issue about $43 million in debt.
Ooh.
And of that $43 million, about $23.4 million is related to water and wastewater projects, about 8 projects in total. And then $4.2 million is related to the soil the soil issue. All the others, there's a combined 45 projects within that $43 million that we're planning on issuing debt for. Now, keep in mind, that was the plan as of the budget deliberations last October. Since that time, there's been announcements of new funding from OSIF and so on and so forth. So it's a revolving door. Those numbers will change as the projects start. But that's the information that we know today.
Maybe I could get into that a little deeper in the next report, but are you saying 43 on top of the 65? That'll put us up over 100 million.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Brunton, yes, that's correct. From 2019 to 2021, I believe, according to our 10-year capital plan, that's the debt that we're planning on issuing.
Wow. And what's the current rate for debenturing? Is it, interest rates have gone up. I assume our rates have gone up. Is that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Brunton, I get updates on the rates from Infrastructure Ontario,
Yep.
and they've gone up about 10 basis points over the last 6 months. Nothing too tragic. However, when we are ready to issue debt, I plan on looking at Infrastructure Ontario and also going to the private sector and to see what kind of rates they have. and we'll see what happens.
Wasn't the last one's around 3.93% or something? Some in that range, or 3.6, 3.93?
Through the chair, I'm getting the nod from my partner here, and yes, that's correct.
So we'll be looking at over 4%, possibly. Possibly.
I wouldn't venture any speculation on that. Who knows what will happen over the next 6 months.
We're kind of moving away
Thank
from
you.
the topic here,
Thank you.
but I haven't got a mover or a seconder for this, so Councillor Black and Councillor Oliver, seconds? Okay. Yeah, the motion's on the floor for discussion. Anybody else wish to speak on it? No? If not, moved by Black, seconded by Oliver, that report FS 1816, read May 31st, 2018 capital status report be received, and that the recommendations set out in the schedule included with report FS 1816 be approved. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And I have asked the clerk's office in the future if they could print larger print for these charts, because I don't think if you read one or two of them and you get really tired, and the magnifying glass out. So hopefully that will happen down the road, Mr. CAO. Okay. So moving on to credit rating review for 2018, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor and members of Council, I'm happy to say that Standard & Poor's has reviewed Norfolk County's financial statements and economic situation, and they are maintaining our AA- stable credit rating. The way that Standard & Poor's does their report, as you can see, they sort of split it up into an outlook for the next 2 years. They give you a downside, an upside, and then concerns. So the outlook over the next 2 years, one of their issues that they've identified is what we just talked about, the amount of debt that we're going to be issuing over the next few years. Currently, our debt is 28.9% of our operating revenues. That's the ratios that Standard & Poor's uses to measure. And if it gets to 60%, then that's when the red flags start to go with our rating. With the projected debt over the next few years, they're seeing that number climbing to 47%. So that is a little bit of a worry or a red flag for them going forward. So that's their outlook for the next couple of years. On the downside, it's similar to their outlook. The aggressive, what they're calling more aggressive capital spending, relying on debt rather than sufficient capital replacement tools. That's one of their main concerns on the downside. On the upside, they were happy with the tax increase that we had for 2018. However, they do caution the consistency of these tax increases. Tax increases represent if you look at their verbiage in their report, that's what they mean by flexible revenue. One of Standard & Poor's concerns in the report is that municipalities have a limited ability to reduce operating expenditures. Now, this isn't to be misinterpreted as reducing your budget. What they're talking about is the legislative expenditures that we have that no matter what our budget is, we have to pay for it. Things like snow plowing on the wastewater side, due to what the Walkerton incident years ago, there's a lot of reporting related to that we have to do through legislation. So to sum up, to maintain or increase our rating, Norfolk needs to reduce their reliance on debt and the way to do that is through increased reserve contributions, which would have to be through the levy or the wastewater rates. And the levy also needs to be reflective of the expected expenditures to avoid significant deficits as well. So that is my summary of the credit rating review that we've had. I'd like to thank the staff that were involved. Chris Baird's not here, but his economic development team helped us with a lot of the information sent to Standard & Poor's, and Kathy and her crew as well. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
He's ready for questions. Councillor Black.
I just want to move the recommendation in the report and speak to it if there's
Okay,
a seconder.
Seconder, Mayor Luke?
Can I
Go
speak
ahead,
to it?
Pete.
Yeah, well, I can't agree more with our treasurer. That's why we've got him here. He's given us good advice, but the unfortunate thing, you know, like we're the go-between. You're giving us the good information, and the council's the go-between to the public. And, you know, the public is always saying, no tax increases. But really, it's clear. I mean, I'm quite happy in a way that you sent that Lee sent the report on the bridges, like 240 bridges, and you look at all the expenses just on our bridges, and we're going downhill in our roads, and then we're in the red for the roads. What are we going to do? I mean, we're going to have to look at property tax levels. I hate to say that because it's like a bad word, but we're going to have to bite the bullet on that one and start looking at that property tax levels.
Councilor Brown?
The one thing that caught my eye in here is the capital spending, and I know we're about 38 million this year, James. What were we 4 years ago when you read the Riot Act to us there, or somebody, I guess your predecessor read the Riot Act? What were we up around 64 million, if I remember? Does that ring a bell?
Through the chair to Councillor Brunn, I'm not sure if it was that high, but what you need to remember, it depends on the projects. You can have 1 year with a wastewater plant in there, and that'll skew those numbers. But I believe the overall message was just the amount of projects that were out there and trying to get them cleaned up. That was the message I understood from 3 or 4 years ago.
So based on this, is it safe to say they want us to take another hard look at our capital spending? Isn't that not, and how we finance it, correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Brunn, my interpretation is not so much take a look at the projects that we have, but the affordability of those projects. We can have as many projects as we need, and once we get the asset management plans in place, we'll have a better idea on that. However, I believe that what the message Standard & Poor's is sending out is not to be reliant on debt for all these capital projects. They're not concerned on the number of capital projects. They leave that up to us to figure that out. But I believe what their concern is that we're planning on using debt for a lot of them, and their recommendation, as you can see, is to not to rely on debt so much.
Well, just a comment, someplace in here, I think we're going to debenture 200,000 for tree removal. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Mayor Luke?
Well, thank you. I just want to make a couple comments. Certainly, in the staff report itself, James and his staff have given us, Mr. Chair, sort of the highlight of why we've gone from an A+ rating in 2013 to where we are now with an A-/stable. But when you go to the S&P report itself, and I'm on page 147 of our agenda, I want to point out two things. At the bottom of the page, they say, and I quote, "We believe the management team has adequate expertise in implementing policy changes. In addition, adequate financial management accountability has continued throughout changes in the administration." So, Mr. Chair, that tells me that our management team here is recognized in this report. They're recognized as being, take some responsibility, if not a great deal of it, for the position that we find ourselves in, which has improved. The other thing that I want to, on the other side of the coin here, is just in the paragraph above it, they talk about two things that are perhaps a hindrance or a constraint, as they call it, to the county, the downside, if you will. First of all, they tell us that 35% of the people right now in our population are over the age of 55, or I guess you could say seniors, which is one of the, they mention is one of the problems, an aging demographic, and it could hinder investment in the county, and I guess that's debatable. But, and the other they talk about, we've known this for years, as they consider the county's location as less favorable to surrounding areas because we're not connected to a major 400 series. We know that there are certain things that hinder us, but we also know that despite those, I think overall it's fair to say our rating is good, and that from a financial position, I'm sure we're in a lot better shape than a lot of municipalities are. So I think there's good work going on here, and continue to, Mr. Chair, we continue to make improvements and do what we can based on the fact that people got to have a little bit of money in their pocket after they pay their taxes to enjoy life. So I think it is what it is, and you do the best you can with what you have.
Thank you. I don't see any further hands up, and we do have a motion moved by Black, seconded by Mayor Luke, that report FS 1820 credit rating review for 2018 be received as information. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We'll move on to page 153. This is the Third Avenue Simcoe Sanitary Sewer Servicing Options. That's you, Ms. Lee Robinson.
Through the chairman to council, before you this afternoon is, as requested by council based on a deputation, options for council to consider with respect to Third Avenue in Simcoe and the availability of putting in sanitary sewers. There's effectively three options that have been prepared for council's recommendation. The first one is a modified gravity system. That would allow them to drain the main floor or the second floor of their homes, but nothing in the basement. So if they had their washers, their washing machines, or any sort of basement bathrooms, showers, etc., they wouldn't be able to drain that. Option 2 is the installation of a sewage pumping station and a force main. And option 3 is the installation of individual sewage pumping, basically an individual sewage pumping station located on every lot. Staff have prepared this for council's consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
She'd be happy to answer questions. Mayor Luke.
Well, I know we all remember the deputation from, I think there were two ladies here. One spoke, and we know this is along the north edge of what used to be Sutton Pond off of 2nd Ave. So with that, a question I do have with option 1, this installation of a modified gravity sewer. Lee just mentioned that option. The estimated cost would be $130,000. You're saying, Lee, if I may, through the chair, that this would allow through gravitation the first floor or the second if they have one, but not the basement, correct?
That is correct.
So who pays the $130,000? Would that be a cost we would put in?
That would be for council to make that decision as to who pays for that. In order to drain effectively the first floors of all the homes and any floor above that, it would be about $130,000 cost. How council chose to proceed with that, obviously it's something that the rate could pay for. So effectively all of the sewer users in Norfolk County would contribute towards that. You could do it through, we could initiate a local servicing option through that way and do it that way and have certain charges that are applied to only those property owners. Or you could agree to enter into a cost-sharing agreement with the property owners to do that. There's all different kinds of funding models.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate that. I think we were talking 5 or 6. I know there's a business on the north side, but I think there was 5 or 6 homes right along 3rd Ave there at the south end. So when you do the math, these are not cheap solutions. The other question I have, certainly Lee, Mr. Chair, has not recommended any of the 3 options. I understand why. The third option, outside of the second option, of course, is the pumping station. They're usually around $500,000. The fourth option, she says in a report, the estimated cost of this option would be about $40,000 per individual property, but coordinated could be less. My question through you is, are you talking that instead of a pump in each house, they could go together to, no, you're not. I'm wondering how much less if they were coordinated. What do you mean by coordinated? I mean, I know what the word means. Thank you.
Through the chairman to council, effectively what that recommendation is saying is anybody who's got a rural property that isn't serviced, if you're trying to service something in your basement, lots of times you put in an injection pump in the basement, you drain everything in your basement and into that, and that pump then in turn pumps it up and out to your septic system. Effectively, the way that this would work would be that everybody would pump out and then it would go through a force main up to the gravity system. So you could effectively have an area that this dump, for lack of a better phrase, this dumps into, that could be jointly owned if every property owner wanted to do that. So the transmission from basically the property line out to where our sewers are would be commonly owned. It would reduce the costs, but it would totally depend on the number of people that were interested in actually going forward with these options.
Mr. Chair, my last question, if the cost, let's say, for argument's sake, was to be entirely borne by the property owner / owners, I would think that something with option 3 would be the least expensive, the most affordable.
Through the chairman to council, option 3 is effectively the option they've always had. We have several of these situations in a variety of places in Norfolk County. And when property owners come forward and they ask how they can connect in, that is an option that they're always been given, that they can effectively build their own injection pump system in their house and then pump it out to our system. It does require that the property owners register with one call, because effectively they'll have infrastructure located in our road and it is a legislative requirement. But other than that, this particular option has always been made available to all residents and was made previously available to these property owners.
And if I may, and I apologize for dominating here a little bit, the questions, but you're saying that system, it would cost an individual property, notwithstanding that they could maybe go together on some of the costs, but that would cost one property owner $40,000 to pump it up from the basement into a main?
Through the chairman to council, for this particular location, yes, because our main is not located that close to them. They've got to go a considerable distance to get it to connect, that's why. As opposed to somebody who's already got a connection at the property line.
Thank you.
Councillor Wells.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I see that Ms. Robinson has given us 3 options, and thank you very much for that, and thank you for your work. On the bottom of page 155, this is the recommendation, I think. Staff would recommend that Council direct Public Works to budget for hiring a consultant engineering firm to fully cost out the design and so on and so forth. Is that what your recommendation is?
Through the chairman to council, we specifically, council directed staff to prepare a whole bunch of options for you guys to consider. Staff weren't actually asked to provide a recommendation for which way to go. We were actually directed to just provide options. We've done that. We've provided the options. If council has decided that they wish to move forward with one or more of them, we would recommend that staff be directed to hire a consultant to fully explore these, whichever options council is desirous of exploring further based on that.
Would you have any idea what the price range may be for an option?
I guess the price ranges that we've included in this report are the price ranges to actually rough cost estimates to do that. I call them more order of magnitude numbers, so that council has an idea of whether this is a $500,000 expenditure, $100,000 expenditure, et cetera. That's what we've provided. If council would like to get into some preliminary engineering and some detail a little bit more detail with respect to any of these options, then staff should be directed to engage a consultant and undertake that. And we know the approximate cost for consultants to start work on these projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Councillor Black.
Well, I guess the theory, I look at the theory, and if there's something that has to be done after the fact, I think there should be some sort of a local improvement charge directly attributed to these individuals. But before doing something like that, I would think we should meet with them and go over these options and see, let them pick. you know, maybe they would say, no, I can't afford that, or no, I don't want to put any money into that. It's cheaper for me just to keep pumping it out, even though it's more expensive now than it used to be. So I'm wondering, Mr. Chairman, through you to Lee, if rather than us making a decision here today, if she could meet, like a public meeting type thing with the residents on Third Ave